Let me show you something that's been happening right in front of your face. You think you're talking. You think you're expressing yourself. But what if you were just responding to a conversation already rigged? They didn't raise their voice. They didn't threaten you. They didn't even argue. They just used certain words with certain timing, in a certain rhythm, and suddenly you felt the need to explain, to soften your stance, to adjust your tone. Not because you were wrong, but because their words rewired the frame. And here's the disturbing part. You didn't notice it. Have you ever apologized in a conversation, but couldn't tell what exactly you did wrong? Have you ever agreed just to keep the peace? Have you ever walked away from someone and felt smaller, but you weren't sure why? That's not miscommunication. That's manipulation by design. A linguistic blueprint crafted to steer your perception while you think you're in control. Because what you call conversation is often just covert redirection. Not about sharing ideas, but about seeding frames. And once the frame is set, you react inside it. No matter how logical you think you're being. Here's the real war. It's not about being loud. It's not about being right. It's about who defines the narrative space. And the most powerful people, they don't chase clarity. They install confusion. They speak. So your logic walks into their maze. This isn't about communication. This is about control. And if you don't know the triggers they use, you'll keep repeating yourself inside a trap they built with a smile and a phrase that sounded reasonable. This video isn't motivation. It's a field guide. To decode the moves, to reclaim the frame. Because in the war of influence, precision always beats passion. And from this moment forward, you're not going to be the one explaining, you'll be the one steering. Let's begin. Let's make something clear. Language is not just communication, it's construction. Every word you hear is a brick laid in a psychological frame. And once that frame is in place, you move inside it. Even when you think you're resisting it, you think people are debating your ideas. No, they're redefining the walls your ideas are allowed to live in. Let's break it down. When someone says, "Why are you so emotional?" It sounds like a question, but it's not. It's a reframing. It plants the idea that your reaction is irrational before your logic even has a chance to breathe. Or when they say, "Help me understand your logic." It sounds respectful, but it's not. It forces you to prove, defend, and justify inside a logic structure they've defined. You're now a guest in a house they designed to make you doubt yourself. That's not a conversation. That's containment. Here's the move. They don't fight your point. They frame it in a way where you start fighting yourself. It's like being handed a stage with invisible walls. You speak, but every sentence is echoing back through a lens you didn't build. And here's what most people miss. You don't win by speaking louder. You win by refusing the frame. That's why the most powerful people don't answer every question. They redirect it. They reframe it. They install their own lens before yours ever lands. The truth, the game isn't in what's said. It's in what's implied. And those implications shape reactions, dictate, tone, and rewrite the rules without permission. So, next time someone speaks, pause. Don't just hear the words. Feel the shape of the frame behind them. Ask yourself, Whose logic am I operating in right now? Because if it's not yours, you're not having a conversation. You're in containment, disguised as dialogue. And that ends now. Real influence rarely looks like domination. It looks like a conversation, a calm tone, a soft smile, a few carefully placed questions. That's where trigger stacking begins. It's not about volume. It's about layers, psychological layers, stacked one after another until a person feels off balance, without knowing why. Let's break this down. First, the guilt loop. You don't accuse. You suggest they might be wrong. You say things like, "You sure that's the best way to handle it? I just don't want you to regret it later." See the move. You're not judging them. You're caring for them on the surface. But underneath, you're planting seeds of hesitation. You've shifted their emotional energy from certainty to self-doubt, second false curiosity. You act like you're open-minded, but you're not. You're constructing a trap. You say, "Interesting. But what made you think that would work?" "I'm just curious." Why take that approach? These aren't real questions. They're pressure points. They make people feel the need to justify themselves, to explain, to perform. And every time they do, they step deeper into the frame you've built. Third, social conditioning. This one is ancient and brutal. You don't say they're wrong. You just say, "That's unusual. Most people don't do that." Now, it's not just their opinion. It's them against the tribe, against tradition, against safety. In a world wired for acceptance, being the only one triggers internal alarms. Suddenly, it's not about logic. It's about survival. Now here's where the stacking happens. Each trigger by itself is a nudge, but together they become a storm. A silent psychological push that makes the other person step back without knowing why they did. You didn't tell them what to do. You didn't force anything. You framed them into editing themselves. This is conversational strategy, strategic softness, weaponized subtlety. Instead of saying, "You're wrong," you say, "Just curious what makes you confident in that idea." Now they're on the defensive. They're validating your frame. And the moment they do that, they're no longer in control. This is how high-level persuasion works. Not through argument, but through atmosphere. You rearrange the emotional air in the room until their instincts feel out of place. And when their instincts feel wrong, they comply. Not because you commanded it, but because their inner voice was quietly redirected. So, next time someone makes you question yourself, ask this: did they confront you, or did they stack triggers until you handed them the wheel? Remember this: real control doesn't shove. It shifts the gravity. Let's talk about logic and the way it's weaponized. You were taught that being logical makes you safe, that being calm means you're in control, that the one with the better argument wins. But here's the truth: no one told you. Most arguments are never about truth. They're about frames, about who gets to define what truth means in the first place. The person who wins the conversation isn't always right. They're just the one who made the rules first. Let that sink in. They chose the tone. They framed the reasonable boundary. And they placed your emotions outside of it. That's not debate. That's design. Watch how it works. They don't say you're wrong. They say, be realistic. Let's keep it logical. Don't get emotional. Sounds fair. Right. But underneath, it's a trap. Because what they're really saying is, your feelings don't belong here. Your instincts are invalid. Only my format counts. Now you're not defending your point. You're defending your presence. You've already lost ground. Strategic phrases like, you're being too sensitive. I'm just trying to help. Calm down. All carry the same subtext. You're unstable. I'm the reasonable one. It's not logic. It's positioning. They pull the conversation into a frame where your energy feels inappropriate, where your truth sounds exaggerated, your hurt sounds irrational, and your instinct sounds emotional. This is how people get silenced, not with insults, but with reasonable-sounding traps, because no one wants to be seen as overreacting. No one wants to be labeled dramatic. So you pull back. You soften your tone. You step back from your own truth. That's not compromise. That's submission dressed in politeness. Real logic doesn't silence. It seeks. But when someone uses logic as a tool to invalidate your emotional data, it's not about truth. It's about power. Because emotions carry data too. If something hurts, there's a reason. If something feels off, there's intelligence in that. Silencing that inner signal just because it doesn't fit their script isn't maturity. It's manipulation. So next time you hear, don't be so emotional. Pause. Ask yourself, is this logic or is this emotional redirection disguised as rationality? Because not every calm tone is kind, and not every reasonable voice seeks truth. Some are just smiling walls built to make you walk away from yourself. Subtext, takeaway. They didn't disprove you. They made you feel invalid just long enough to silence yourself. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say in a conversation is nothing. Not because you're lost, not because you're weak, but because you've mastered the art of emotional containment. They raise their voice. You lower yours. They escalate. You exhale. And in that gap you shift the entire dynamic. This isn't about being passive. This is about being precise. Because emotional containment isn't silence out of fear. It's silence as pressure. It's the calm stare that makes them second guess. It's the long pause that makes them fill the space and expose their position. Let's break this down tactically. When you speak, you don't always need volume. You need weight. You don't chase agreement. You don't race to clarify. You drop sentences like anchors. Short, still, heavy. Examples of soft dominance. That's one way to look at it. You didn't argue. You didn't agree. But you reframed. Noted. One word. No emotion. But it lands like a closed door. Perhaps ambiguous. Unshaken. It leaves them unsure because you stayed composed. Here's what most people miss. When someone is emotional in a conversation, the natural instinct is to match their energy, to raise your voice, to defend, to correct. But that's reaction. And reaction is control handed over. Containment is different. You don't suppress. You hold. You feel the tension, but you don't let it shape you. You acknowledge the emotion, but you don't release it where they expect. And that makes you unreadable, uncontrollable, unshakable. Imagine this moment. Someone throws an accusation. They're loud. They expect a defensive answer. And you say, "That's interesting." Then pause, hold, look, and let the weight of your calm do the damage. Because they were ready to fight, but they weren't ready to face themselves. Emotional containment isn't silence. It's command. It's the discipline to hold your center when others are losing theirs. Subtext takeaway. When they escalate, you contain. And in that containment, power shifts. Not with noise, but with presence. Control doesn't always look like control. Sometimes it looks like stillness. Sometimes it feels like you're doing nothing, but the direction of the room is shifting anyway. That's not coincidence. That's conversational judo. The art of steering without pushing, of influencing without announcing. You see, most people try to win a conversation by arguing louder. They interrupt, they correct, they chase. But the powerful don't fight momentum. They redirect it. They let you talk. Then move the floor beneath your feet. Here's how it works. You embed suggestions inside the frame of curiosity. You don't say, "You're wrong." You ask, "What makes you so sure that's right?" You don't say, "You're insecure." You say, "Are you sure that's not just fear talking?" Now, watch what happens. Their confidence shakes, their certainty melts, and they start negotiating with themselves. That's what embedded suggestion does. It makes people question their position without ever feeling attacked. It's not confrontation, it's inception, and it feels natural, because it was never your idea. It was theirs, or so they think. Let's apply it. Say someone challenges you in a meeting. They push their point. They demand agreement. Most people defend. They counter. They escalate. But you don't. You pause. Then say, "Interesting. Why do you think that keeps happening?" Now they're searching inward instead of pushing outward. You just turned defense into self-reflection without saying a word about yourself. That's conversational judo. Or imagine a negotiation. Instead of demanding a better deal, you say, "You're free to go that route. Just keep in mind, the ones who did that last time regretted it." It's not a threat. It's not control. It's just weight. You're not forcing. You're tilting. This works in relationships too. Someone accuses you, attacks you emotionally, demands a reaction. You respond with silence, or with one line. That's one interpretation. Perhaps, "I see." Short, neutral, undeniably powerful. Because in that moment, you didn't escalate. You absorbed. You recentered the dynamic. They're still talking. But now, they're off balance. Subtext is everything. It's not the words. It's the posture. It's the presence behind the words. It's your ability to hold space without spilling. Let's be honest, most people don't want truth. They want to win. So give them the illusion of winning, while guiding them exactly where you want. That's not manipulation. That's navigation. Key takeaway: The strongest influence isn't loud. It's surgical. It doesn't push. It leans just enough for them to fall in the direction you designed. Let's bring this full circle. You've seen how words shape minds, how silence redirects tension, how questions, not answers, hold the frame. And now you know you don't need to dominate the room. You don't need to speak first. You don't even need to be fully understood. What you need is to become the one who designs the space others must speak within. That's real control. Quiet. Undeniable. Surgical. Remember this, it's not the volume of your voice that wins. It's the weight of your frame. Because words don't win. Frames do. The person who defines the terms controls the conversation. Contrôle perception. Controls the outcome. So here's your protocol. Today, pick one situation. One conversation where you normally shrink. Explain. Or justify. It could be with a colleague, a partner, a friend. This time, pause. Watch your body. Notice the urge to speak quickly. Don't. Instead, say less. Pause more. Ask instead of explain. Redirect instead of defend. Use questions that place weight, not pressure. Frame the moment like an architect designs a space, with precision, with intention, and with calm. This isn't about sounding smarter. It's about sounding colder, calmer, more composed than the chaos around you. Because when people feel your stillness, they adjust themselves. Let me leave you with this. From now on, don't chase clarity, shape perception. Because when you control the frame, if this unlocked something in, you share it. Not because it's a message, but because it's a shift, and someone else out there is still trapped in loops. Thinking, speaking louder is the way to win. They don't need noise. They need a blueprint. Be the one who moves in silence, but never without impact. We don't just speak. We architect reality. Game on.